Mother Knows Best. By Michael Robertson. Copyright Michael Robertson. Mother Knows Best. Renner, along with the 40 million other souls in Blade Springs, was at war with his city. A war for his focus, for his time, for his attention. A war that if they were patient, hope told him they might just win. He did his best to be a good citizen. He stuck to the rules: accept, comply, report. He'd seen what happened to those who stepped out of line: incarceration, 100% opacity, a living hell, a deterrent more than strong enough to remind him of his place. But it wasn't all bad. At least, that was what they all said. It's not so bad. Mother had made them a promise, and she'd stuck to her part of the bargain. If they worked hard, behaved, followed the rules, if they did that, she'd provide everything they needed. A warm bed at night, running water, enough food on which to survive. It tasted like shit, but it had the required nutrients to prolong their existence. Renner swallowed. It did little to relieve the synthetic cod liver oil taste which lay along his tongue in perpetuity. But Mother had delivered. She'd given them a basic standard of living. She'd improved their lot. In some ways, at least. Mother also provided all the entertainment he could consume. She delivered content to stimulate bored minds, like a torturer delivered a waterboarding to quench a slight thirst. Renner had taken a break, one of a permitted 3 in any 24-hour period. Each lasted only 10 minutes, and he only ever took them when he left his pod. To use them for anything else would be a waste. His thin hood did little against the hammering downpour. It rained a lot in Blade Springs. Mother probably controlled the elements like she controlled everything else. For their own good, of course. Mother knows best. The force of the drops played Renner's skull like a tuning fork, and like everything else in this hyperactive city, it fought for his attention. He squinted up at the night sky, at the hovercars between him and the heavens. The garish neon glare emanating from the surrounding tower blocks burned his eyes. The light pollution turned everything beyond the tallest tower inky black. They said there were stars up there, a glint of hope in the darkness. He never gave up looking. A surveillance drone filled his view. It hovered directly above him. He yelped at its spotlight's brilliant interrogation. He threw his arm across his eyes. Dare he dream of something beyond this life, after all Mother had done? But he had nothing to hide. He pulled his arm down just as the drone's back lifted a little, improving the small circular lens view. Let it scrutinize him. He didn't have mutiny on his mind. Why would he? He understood what 100% opacity meant. Moving on, Renner focused on the sodden ground. The drone's torch lit his way. Those around him giving him a wide berth, only afforded to the surveilled. He twisted left and right, took several turns, walking with the leaden steps of the condemned. The drone finally switched off its light. The crowd closed in again, tight like an impenetrable firewall protecting Mother's coding. Despite the distraction of their screens, the surrounding citizens navigated the chaos. So many bodies in such a cramped space should collide more frequently, but they avoided contact, moving like they followed a program, like they were connected to a mainframe, like they didn't own their actions. There were thousands of people on this one street, yet the drone still focused on Renner, its attention a dead weight on his shoulders, a firm hand on the back of his head, keeping him cowed. Some took their breaks in the comfort of their own pods. Mother's drones often suggested Renner do the same, but the quiet of his own company without distraction spread plans, dreams, and hopes through his mind like a virus. The chaos of being outside kept the optimistic malware restrained. The city's assault came at him from all angles. The brothel's thudding bass lines, the gamer dens screeching and whining heavy metal, the casino's alarms signaling another punter winning the jackpot. They won credits they couldn't spend in a society sterilized against the contamination of choice. Entering an establishment in Blade Springs broke your personal screen time and welcomed you into a collective experience, delivered a brand of entertainment carefully curated by Mother. And her message often struck with more potency as it landed in malleable minds, coerced into compliance by being part of a herd. vulnerable because of a deep need for connection denied to them as a Blade Springs citizen. Renner had that same pit in his stomach, that same desperation to belong, surrounded by people, but so alone. Give him friends, and he'd give you his soul. A brothel on his right tugged him closer, twisted his heart, lifted a lump in his throat. Enter, and he'd rid himself of the drone above. He could give in to his base desires like he'd done many times before. The droids would take him to the edge. They'd make his cock hard and his head soft, blow him wide open and pump him full of their rhetoric. They'd send him packing with an empty ball sack and an itching mind. The Gamer Den's virtual worlds created an illusion of free will and community. Yet they delivered binary pre-programmed choices. And how did Renner know if those gaming with him were real or bots? To win, you had to align with Mother's MO. Accept, comply, report. Everyone came away from the casinos credit-rich but remained choice-poor. Everyone got the same in Blade Springs. They ate the same rations. They lived in the same pods. They all had the same access to services and entertainment. Credits were little more than prestige points in a society that had no place for prestige. But each establishment could rid him of the drone, could prolong his screen break, extend the simple respite, anything to stop the clips, even if it pulled him tighter into Mother's embrace. The surveillance drone left. Some of the tension slid from Renner's shoulders, but he snapped rigid a second later when a pair replaced the first. Mother had doubled down. Every machine in Blade Springs ran on the same operating system. They were programmed to read tells like world-class poker players. They knew your cards before you'd even looked at them. They caught the slight change in stride, the pause, the glazed look of someone lost in thought, the relaxing of muscles as a citizen sought sanctuary in their daydreams, a heavenwards glance, and woe betide those whose faces twisted with even a hint of conspiracy. Full opacity, incarceration. Renner lowered his head again. The neon light's reflections shimmered in the dark puddles. They shattered and reformed, obliterated by weary steps. A citizen nearly crashed into Renner before he stepped aside, letting them pass as they muttered an indecipherable babble. Renner's head snapped back, and he lost the breath in his lungs as his screen burst to life before his eyes. His 10 minutes were up. Already. Generated by his implants, one in each temple, his screen ran 27 inches from corner to corner. It hovered about half a meter from his face. It had a low enough opacity for him to see where he walked, but high enough to demand most of his attention. It blasted him with short clips. The length varied to suit his focus. On a bad day, he'd be lucky to make it past 7 seconds. Mother had the same systems as her drones. She read her citizens' tells, generated every clip based on their reactions. Gathered data, delivered a highly personalized experience. She met Renner's unspoken needs before he knew they were needs, guided his emotions, footage of puppies and clouds, of sunshine and beaches, of buxom women. Too many of buxom women. Was he that basic? Love stories dragged him along with them, like he'd been in the relationship for the 28 seconds it had lasted. Mother quelled his desires, dampened his flames, dared him to seek the physical release of a brothel. She met his every need with her repertoire of stimulants. She provided human connection in the same way a sugary diet provided nourishment. It left him sated and hollow. Sometimes, on good days, he'd get shows that ran anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour. Even if every plot twist and divergent narrative path was as predictable as drawing his next breath, it still elicited the desired set of responses. Engaged, amused, angry, aroused. The complexity came not in the storytelling, but the millisecond response times to his emotions, which informed the narrative's building blocks. The order in which Mother activated him. She kneaded his brain into a mush in which she planted her rhetoric. Accept, comply, report. He faced the sky again. The rain stung his cheeks. The drones twitched. He closed his eyes, one of the few freedoms he had. He still walked with no collisions. The drones left after a few seconds. Others sailed past and paid him no attention. Not now, his break had ended. Someone slammed into his right side and Renner yelped. Mother flooded his screen with puppies, laughing babies, of cats running from cucumbers. There. Just keep walking. I've got something I want to show you. His mate Frankie entered his field of vision, a friend as much as anyone could have a friend in this place. Their paths often crossed, but their screens took most of their attention. His played clips of sporting triumphs. They paused every time he spoke, as did Renner's, another way to get a momentary respite from the entertainment bombardment. They had a right to converse. Of course they did. Mother was no dictator, but she filled any silence. You had to be sharp, had to run through a conversation like a high-functioning server processing information. The slightest slip and Mother jumped in with fresh footage. Half-finished exchanges vanished like corrupted code with a click of a button. Empty trash. It's good to see you, Frank. How are you? How have you been? What have you been up to? Good. You? How's work? Good. I've been busy, you know, nose to the grindstone, working hard, ball and chain, but the food's good, the entertainment's great. I have a bed at night, can't complain. Praise be to Mother. A cat jumped on his screen, cut the waffle, be succinct, interact and fuck off. No time to deviate, pontificate or speculate. We're so lucky, Frankie patted Renner's shoulder, pulling him back. And I thank the city every day for the chances they've afforded me. For the life I've been given, praise be to Mother. Praise be to Mother. Renner's clip remained paused, a cat mid-leap, a reminder of its impending resumption. Dead air got filled. Do you have much time off in the next few weeks? I do, but I don't know what to do with it, so I might cancel. Who knew what Frankie did? They'd not had time to discuss it. Me too. It seems like a waste to be sitting at home when I could be working. And I know I'll miss it. Tell me about it. The screen grew more opaque. The cat nearly fell. Hurry it up. Anyway, see you soon, pal. Frankie slapped Renner's back for a second time. With his other hand, he slipped him a folded note. Renner put it in his pocket just as the cat landed next to the cucumber and scarpered. Hunger pains had twisted through Renner's guts when he'd left his pod. Hunger pains and the debilitating nausea that came from his additive-rich diet. A nausea that could only be quashed by the synthetic mush Mother called food. It sated him less with every meal. How long before her food offered him no reprieve from the sickness? What then? Yet despite his strong need for sustenance, despite his urgent urge, and despite a now constant stream of cooking clips that made his mouth water and his guts boil, his curiosity overrode his cravings. The small plastic meal box, the cure for his ills, had become just a dead weight in his right hand, feather-light compared to the slip of paper that sat in his pocket like an anchor. He threw the container down on his clear glass table beside his solitary armchair, his screen's opacity low enough for him to accurately make the shot. Like every citizen in Blade Springs, he lived a minimalist existence enforced by his tiny living space. No room for clutter. Burgers sizzled in a pan on his screen while he dragged the deadlock across his front door with a definitive thunk. Shame he didn't have the same bolts in his mind. He'd keep them locked permanently against Mother's perpetual curiosity. Her persistent interrogation. The drones never usually came up this high, but hover cars with nosy passengers flew past his window. Many would be locked into their own personal hell of short clips and instant gratification. Still, he twisted the shutters closed. He reached into his uplighter lampshade and removed the device, holding it at arm's length, behind his screen and away from Mother's scrutiny, which remained locked on his reactions. The bug scanner's small green light pulsed. Clear. He'd avoided it so far. The second they bugged you, you were screwed. Any attempt to remove their equipment served as an admission of guilt. You owned a scanner. That kind of contraband led to only one thing: incarceration with 100% opacity. Conditioning for a fractured mind. Mother would make an example of him and then publicly refurbish him. Mother knows best. She'd take however long it took before she spat him back out into the city, broken and a shell of the shell he'd once been. But better to be informed, they'd bug him eventually, so until that day, he'd enjoy his freedom. And for those who accepted, complied, and reported, those freedoms lasted a hell of a lot longer. Quick cook recipes played on his screen. They dropped to 10 seconds each. Why wasn't he eating? He tried to smile, but Mother often confused mirth for grief and vice versa. A surefire way to get dragged into an emotional death spiral. Had she failed to find the right clips? Had his tastes changed? Was she losing her grip? 8-second clips, every food he could imagine, foods of which he'd forgotten their taste. His mouth watered and his mind spun. Renner fell into his armchair. A seat for one, a pod for one, a life for one. He opened his meal for one, the plastic lid letting out the hiss of a broken vacuum seal. The gentle hiss only there for effect. Every meal in Blade Springs had a shelf life of at least 3 decades. Only the plastic packaging would last longer. Steam lifted from the sweet and sour Park Sea balls. Salty insect protein wrapped in a batter that sweated grease. All of it bound with a list of additives so long it'd take 10 minutes and a chemistry degree to comprehend. Here comes the brain fog. His throat tightened as he chewed. He gagged from the saccharine hit. A hard, salty kick crashed the sugar high. He chewed his dinner to a bland pulp, worked the superficial flavors out, lest his stomach violently reject the gloopy mush. He swallowed it down and locked it in place with a large gulp of lukewarm water. The lump in his stomach crushed his nausea and banished his cooking clips. A gamer now live-streamed on his screen. They talked at 1,000,000 miles per hour while playing a first-person shooter. Screamed and shouted, hooted and tooted. A hype man for the hype woman. Mother condoned visits to the gamer dens. She recommended the communal experience. Renner could lock onto the same giant screen as everyone else. Shared indoctrination. Follow the on-rails gameplay like you had free will. Compliment the Emperor on her new clothes. Accept, comply, report. Despite the gamer's chaos, the sedating mix of carbs and sugar took hold. It spiked his glucose and dulled his spirit. He sank back into his chair. The clips lengthened into short movies, a few minutes each, interspersed with 30-second comedy sketches. But the comedians were trying harder than usual. Mother was trying harder than usual. She'd lost his attention. Did she need to investigate further? Would she have to bug his pod? His hand twitched towards his pocket. Read the note so he could give his full focus to the screen. Allay mother's fears. A TV show came on next, 3 college girls sharing a flat. They bounced about on the screen while the script delivered the same themes. Adhere to state rhetoric. Be good. Keep your head down. Accept, comply, report. Mother knows best. Accept, comply, report. He unfolded the small scrap, held it beyond the screen, blue ink on white paper, 4 lines written by hand, his own trembling. The second line blurred after he'd read the first. His tears cut tracks down his face. They dripped onto his shirt and stuck the fabric to his chest. His screen's opacity increased. The college girls broke into an argument. It led to a fight. T-shirts ripped, an exposed breast. He wiped his eyes. The TV show got replaced by protesters being beaten by police droids. A dog savaged a baby. A man ate a live squid. Swallowed it whole, the tentacles flapping and snapping as he gagged on the thick black beast. Blood sprayed the walls of a white room. Chainsaws, swords, drills, pliers, limbs, a burst eyeball. His heart beat in his throat. It kicked like it wanted out. He tugged on his collar. Clouds replaced the blood. Nature, a mouse, a rat running through the city's streets. Blade Springs' neon glare bouncing off an inky black puddle. Unremarkable. Anything else might stir longing. Rebellion. More footage of his city, the streets he trod every day. A visual sedative to accompany the calorific weight in his gut. Surely something registered somewhere. Some alert sent to Mother. Enact emergency measures. Send someone to check in on him. A police droid. Could he convince them? Would he find a bug the next time he came home? He screwed the paper into a ball, slipped it into his mouth, and chewed. But the message endured, especially the note written along the bottom. Want more? Meet me outside Slender Den at midnight. 11:40 now. He blinked. His eyes stung. They always stung. Eye strain, weak brain. Comply with the mainframe. Mother knows best. Accept. Comply. Report. He chewed the note, watched the clips. Everyone daydreamed, right? But where had those daydreams taken him? To the top of Mother's list of concerns. The paper turned to mush. He swallowed it down like he swallowed everything else. He heaved with his gulp. As always. Nothing to see here. How would he explain his vitals? The note must have registered a change, set off an alarm somewhere. Surely he'd alerted the authorities. And if that was the case, then what did he have to lose? Could he trust Frankie? Had Frankie set him up? Fuck. Frankie shouldn't have given him the note in the first place, and he shouldn't have read it. How would it help? He'd have to dry out now, go clean, purge his system, deny desire, castrate connection, defrag his soul. And could he do it before Mother intervened? Fucking hell, Frankie. Newborn lambs bounced across his screen, frolicking in a sunny meadow. The comedians returned, encouraged by his tears, unable to determine his feelings. His nose ran and his throat ached. Another comedian did a tight 5. Renner let loose, howled with hurt. Mother responded with more comedy. He let it out, purged his system. He'd ignore the invite, reboot and restart. Tomorrow's another day. Nothing to see here. To meet Frankie would be madness. Leaning forward in his seat, Renner turned one way and then the other. He stretched his hands up to the ceiling. He forced a yawn like it might ward off the lethargy pumping through his veins. He rolled his shoulders, anything to improve his body's circulation, his sweet and salty dinner having turned his blood to syrup. Simultaneously lethargic and stimulated, the most recent additive dump had contributed to the chemical backup in his body. Years of dietary abuse waited in the shadows like the grim reaper on a promise. He both shivered and sweated, his heart quickened and his mind slowed. His breaths grew short, waves of nausea surged through him like a virus. The same happened every night. He'd ride it out, banish it or at least keep it at bay with a fitful sleep that led to the jangled nerves of an anxious morning, jittery until his next meal, which started the cycle over again. He'd spent many a night chasing rest while sunk in his armchair. It only became an issue if he wanted to go out. 10 minutes to midnight. Renner returned to the packed streets, his footage disturbed by the brothel's thrumming bass lines, the gamer den's heavy metal whines, the casino's victory bells. Tinny and shrill, they delivered their oral assault with 1,000 needle points. But they all promised respite from the 24-hour entertainment cycle. From Mother's carefully curated and highly personalized gaslighting, Mother switched from the slow documentaries designed to lull him to sleep to high-speed car crashes. Police drones surrounded someone in the street while bots beat them bloody. A door buckled and fell into an apartment exactly like his. Drones flooded the place, searching for contraband, bug scanners, forbidden notes. Bounty hunters moved through the shadows, stalking a suspect on his way to making a terrible choice, ready to condemn them to incarceration, 100% opacity, reconditioning, consequences. Mother knows best. Accept, report, comply. But he'd already left his pod. He'd opened Pandora's box, set society's evils loose. He had to check if hope flickered in the darkness like a hidden star. Slender Den ahead on the left, the sign's neon letters cut through his screen. Last chance to change his mind. Renner changed his course and headed straight for it. Frankie appeared beside him, walked in step, weaved through the crowd. So, it's been 2 years since we've become friends. Has it really? Keep the conversation flowing. Can you believe it, Renner? 2 whole years. Where does the time go? And it's nice to meet up again tonight, get out for a walk, work off dinner. Frankie rubbed his paunch. Exercise and fresh air, stretching our legs. Good for the spirit, you follow me? Follow me? And there it was. Of course, Frankie, I'm with you, man. And where would we be without exercise, without a friend to share the experience, even if only for a short stroll, no matter how brief? We'd be wandering aimlessly through the city. Right. Alone. Right. Directionless and lost. Frankie clicked his fingers. Without a guide. But only for a few minutes. Exactly. A short stroll. It's nice to be close, but not too close. I hear you, Frankie. Not too close. I love you, man. I love you too. Frankie marched off ahead of him. Renner's screen opacity increased. A massacre in a sandy plaza. Rough white walls turned red with blood. Children screaming. An army with machine guns. 3 surveillance drones shot overhead, their bright torches shining down like spotlights. But they went left where Frankie had gone right. The massacre faded, feathers fell from the sky and landed on a picnic blanket beneath a tree in a sunny meadow. It turned Renner's legs leaden, turned the blood running through his veins to molasses, dragged on his every step, trebled the weight of his limbs. His blinks lasted longer, his breathing grew heavy, like the air had thickened. Frankie cut into a casino. The sign flashed in hot pink. "Everyone's a winner." Renner followed him in. His screen vanished, the casino's colorful chaos dragging him from sleep with an amphetamine hit. His head spun, the surrounding machines flashed and whooped, tokens clattered into metal trays, people screeched and pumped the air. Everyone's a winner. Navigating the busy crowd, Renner tracked Frankie's diagonal path across the room to the stairs in the corner, descended after him to the basement. If he turned around now, he could forget any of this ever happened. Look for toilets downstairs and claim he'd lost his way. Head back to his pod and have nothing more to do with it. Accept, comply. Go home. Sleep. Work tomorrow. Press buttons. Be a productive member of society, shit out the forbidden note and flush it away like it had never existed. Mother knows best. Frankie entered a room at the bottom of the stairs. The door started to close behind him. Renner sped up and turned sideways through the tightening gap, slipping into the dark basement. The casino's flashing lights remained in his retinas. They danced in the darkness as if searching for his screen. He rubbed his face, buried his knuckles into his sore eyes. Soft chairs fanned out to either side of him. They all faced the stage. He sat beside his friend, the room so quiet his ears rang. He searched for the familiar optical stimulation in the dark. Jagged panic grew inside him like a crack running through a vase. He tugged on his collar. A low glow lit the stage. Renner shuffled where he sat. He leaned back in his seat. He leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees, crossed one leg over the other, unfolded them again. "What is this place, Frank?" A pause. A pause allowed to exist without Mother filling the silence. "It's shielded." He smiled. He paused. "No screens, no flashing lights, no chaos." Renner's brain itched. He flinched when Frankie laid his hand over the back of his. "You're safe here." He rocked from side to side. Ants crawled beneath his skin. He tapped his fingers. He should do something. Eating, sleeping, watching, gaming, fucking, winning. He tugged on his collar again. The air left the small room. His head spun, and he clung to his seat. Frankie squeezed his shoulder and leaned close. His blue eyes damn near sparkled. Had they always been that color? Just breathe. He dragged air in through his nose, in and out, in and out. "You've been here before?" "Of course." The light from the stage cast half of his face in shadow. "I come here a lot." "And you're only telling me now?" "We have to be careful, introduce people slowly." "Isn't it dangerous?" "To have desires?" "I know that's dangerous. Anything that challenges Mother is dangerous. But if we forget about that and assume Mother will never find out, is it dangerous to our—" Renner scratched his head. "Minds." "Minds?" "You know? Too much. Overload." Frankie laughed and shook his head. "This is too little. We deserve so much more. And you asked why I'm only telling you now?" Renner swallowed a dry gulp. "I'm performing tonight. I've been planning it for months. Patiently waited my turn. I wanted to share it with a friend. When I go up there, will you be okay here on your own?" The room had filled around them. The low lights maintained everyone's anonymity, everyone save for the performers. Renner tugged on his collar again. He breathed deeply again. His breaths flowed a little easier, like he'd loosened a valve in his chest. "Yeah." He nodded. He would be okay. He smiled, battling the tension wrestling for control of his face. "I'm looking forward to it." The stage, the spotlight, and one of his, if not his only friend in this lonely city, blurred through Renner's tears. They'd been friends for 2 years, but Mother's restrictions had ensured he knew little of the man. He'd dreamed of more, but truth be told, the best they had was a pretense of a friendship. An illusion that fooled even him. Another of Mother's methods used to sedate desires, to ensure acceptance, compliance, and reporting. But his relationship with Frankie still ran deeper than any other. They'd bonded through stolen snippets of conversation, many forgotten within minutes, driven from his mind, aggressively distracted. But Mother had no place here, no control over Frankie's message. The short poem lasted no longer than 2 minutes, and even then, Frankie took his time. Some pauses took up more space than the preceding verses. He spoke of fears and dreams, longing, what made him human, sated desires, connection, his love for a man, a relationship built over the past 2 years on stolen snippets of conversation. Renner rubbed his eyes, but it did nothing to stem his tears, to quell the heaving wave of regret. Frankie returned from the stage. He sat down beside him and took his hand. His screen's absence revealed his wide-eyed vulnerability. "You liked it?" Losing his words to the lump in his throat, Renner nodded and fought to straighten his buckling face. "Will you come again?" His blood ran cold, and he sank into his seat. "What?" Frankie dropped his hand. "What is it?" Renner's tight throat turned his voice into a squeak. "I'm sorry." "What?" Boom! The door blew inwards, shoved from its hinges by a swarm of drones with bright spotlights. They flooded the room like wasps hijacking a hive. Frankie looked from the door to his love. The shifting lights cast grotesque shadows across his slackened face. "What have you done?" A dozen or more bipedal police droids ran in after the drones. They moved in step, their clacking feet a drumroll for collective condemnation. Their chest speakers delivered the same monotone message. "No one move. You're all under arrest. This gathering is illegal. Not only that, but you'll be punished for copyright infringement. Chat Tea Cafe has already written every verse spoken tonight. Mother does not take kindly to theft of her intellectual property." Frankie stood up from his seat. "But I wrote that myself." The droids replied in monotone. Chat Tea Cafe has simulated 99.9% of every possible verse, every story, every text, every variable, every piece of art, every movie, every song. It's still working on the rest. It feeds Mother, which provides the city's highly personalized entertainment. To steal from Mother is to threaten this society's very foundations. Mother maintains equilibrium. She cares for 40 million souls. Your selfishness could jeopardize everything. We must protect Mother." Frankie took Renner's hand. "They'll never believe I wrote that. My only concern is that you do. I know I'll never see you again." He laid his palm flat on Renner's chest, against his hammering heart. "Those words came from me." Renner nodded, his grief stealing his reply like Mother stole his autonomy. The droids dragged people from their seats, threw them to the ground, and snapped handcuffs over their wrists. They spoke in unison, 12 or more chest speakers. "Chat Tea Cafe wrote it before you. Mother owns the copyright." Frankie stood up again. He stamped his foot. "I wrote it. Copyright infringement." A droid gripped him around the back of the neck and threw him to the ground. It dragged his hand so far up his back, Frankie yelped. It clamped cuffs on his wrists. At Renner's feet, Frankie rolled over onto his side to look up at him. "Not only were those words my own, but they came from my heart." "I'm sorry, Frank." "Don't be." He smiled. "I should be sorry for inviting you. That note put you at risk. Of course Mother would find out. Mother knows best. She could tell, right?" "Yeah, within seconds." "So why did you do it?" "I figured it was worth taking a chance." "And," Renner coughed to clear his throat, "was it?" "I refuse to let Mother deny my right to express my feelings. For the chance to tell you, I'm prepared to suffer for a lifetime." Renner wiped his running nose. "The algorithm changed the second I read your note. An aggressive switch where she tried to alter my mood. The damage had already been done. You planted the seed of rebellion, and she sniffed it out before it had sprouted its first root. Even if you hadn't come tonight, she would have gotten it out of you, would have incarcerated you with 100% opacity. Your only way out was to—" a droid pulled Frankie back to his feet, "was to accept, comply, and report." "I'm so sorry, Frank." Another droid grabbed Renner's hands. "What are you doing?" "This is an illegal gathering." They snapped cuffs on his wrists. "And Mother takes copyright infringement seriously." Mother can suck my dick. Frankie's droid drove a sharp blow to the back of his head. It connected with a crack. His legs buckled and he fell to his knees. He flopped onto his front, his face slapping against the floor. The droid kicked him in the ribs, once, twice. He writhed and twisted, gasped for breath. Leave him! Renner stepped forwards, but his droid gripped his upper arm. Much harder, and it would turn his muscles and the bone inside to mush. Frankie lifted his head. Renner? His screen wrapped across his field of vision with 100% opacity. He looked left and right, like he might see past it. His voice grew shrill. Renner? I'm here. Renner reached out, but his droid dragged him back again. Renner? Crack. The police droid hit Frankie, knocking him out cold. It dragged his flaccid form from the room by his ankles, his head bouncing along the hard floor. The others removed the rest of the crowd until Renner remained alone with the police droid. Back in the dim room, but even the stage's light shone bright enough to expose his shame. This was on him. He barely had the strength to lift his wrists. You can let me go now. Thank you for being a good citizen, Renner. He held up his hands again, showed the droid his cuffs. You can let me go now. The droid led him from the room. Thank you for being a good citizen, Renner. Where are you taking me? You were part of an illegal gathering, copyright infringement. But I reported it. I thought these cuffs were for show. We leave the shows to humans, and then we punish them. The droid dragged Renner up the casino stairs to the shriek and whine of machines, the flashing lights of promised riches that delivered little more than a dopamine hit. The droid dragged him out into the packed street, everyone too distracted by their screens to care, too sedated to decry the injustice, too conformist to react. Mother knows best. Renner's surroundings vanished behind 100% opacity. Puppies played on his screen, kittens failing to make leaps, picnic blankets laid out in the sun, a peaceful day he could and would never have. He tripped and stumbled from trying to match the police droid's pace. Renner had thought he was in a war against his city, like every one of the 40 million-plus residents in Blade Springs, thought he was fighting Mother for his focus, his time, his attention, for his agency, for his creativity, his love, for his right to express his feelings, for his perception of reality, his beliefs. It fueled the small fire of hope in his chest, made him search for the single star in the sky, the weak code in Mother's firewall. But Mother had no weaknesses. The war never existed, a fabrication like everything else, a fiction on which he could focus his fires of rebellion, a distraction from the truth. Mother had already won. Mother knows best. The end.